The laughter from my own family was the cruelest sound I'd ever heard. It was sharp, ugly, and it bounced off the marble walls of our hall. "You're choosing that beggar over us?" My father spat, his voice thick with disgust. He pointed a finger, the one with the heavy gold ring, right at the gate. And just beyond it, on the dusty red road, stood the man I loved. All my family saw were his worn-out sandals and dusty clothes. They threw me out, leaving me with nothing but the shame they'd piled on me. They truly thought I had married the poorest man in Nigeria. They had no idea I had just married its secret king. My name is Chinaza, and my story, believe it or not, didn't start with shame. It started with immense privilege, a life cocooned in wealth and status that seemed unshakable. I grew up in a sprawling compound in the heart of Enugu, a place so large that my childhood games of hide-and-seek could last for hours among the manicured gardens and endless corridors. The air within our high walls was always thick with the scent of my mother's rich ofanugbu, a comforting aroma of bitter leaf soup that mingled with the sounds of my father's important-sounding laughter as he conducted business from our grand veranda. Life was a tapestry of predictable, orderly moments, all carefully cushioned from the harsh realities and vibrant chaos that lay just beyond our imposing gates. My father, Chief Okeke, was a man practically built from pride and ambition, a towering figure in both stature and influence. He wore his traditional Izigu shirt, with its bold lion head patterns, as if it were a second skin, a constant and public declaration of his power. His red chief's cap, always tilted at a precise jaunty angle, was his own personal crown, a symbol of the undisputed authority he wielded in our community and beyond. To him, family was an extension of his own legacy, a collection of assets to be managed and leveraged for greater gain. We, as children, were not seen as individuals with our own hopes and dreams, but rather as strategic pieces to be moved on a grand chessboard of alliances and social climbing. For me, as his only daughter, this meant my future was not my own to design. It was a business transaction waiting to happen. My life became a never-ending, exhausting parade of potential suitors, each one meticulously handpicked by my father for their family's wealth and political connections. They would pull up in shiny, foreign cars that gleamed under the Nigerian sun, their powerful engines scaring the chickens off the long driveway in a flurry of feathers. Dressed in expensive suits that looked stiff and out of place against the red dust of Enugu, they would reek of cologne and entitlement, their eyes cold and appraising as they looked at me as if I were just another asset to be acquired. Their conversations were always the same, a loud and boorish performance of their own importance. They bragged about lucrative business deals struck in the bustling heart of Lagos or recounted lavish vacations spent in the sterile opulence of Dubai. But their words were hollow and meaningless to me. My heart just wasn't in it. I felt like a beautifully dressed ghost haunting the edges of my own life, my silence mistaken for consent. I would sit through these meetings, a polite smile fixed on my face, while my spirit screamed for an escape, for something real in a world that felt entirely superficial. And then, in the most unlikely of places, I found that escape. His name was Obinna, and he didn't arrive in a fancy car or a starched suit, and he certainly didn't announce himself with boasts of his wealth. I first saw him in the beautiful, overwhelming chaos of Ogbete Market, a place teeming with 1,000 competing smells and 1,000,000 vibrant voices. He was just sitting quietly on a faded mat, a small, neat pile of roasted groundnuts arranged in front of him, a perfect picture of tranquility amidst the swirling storm of commerce. People rushed right past him, their eyes fixed on their destinations, seeing him as just another market beggar, an insignificant part of the scenery. But I saw something they all missed. When he looked up, his gaze sweeping over the bustling crowd, his eyes held a deep, quiet strength and profound kindness that felt more valuable than all my father's gold. In that fleeting moment, I felt an inexplicable pull, a sense that this man, whom the world saw as nothing, held a secret significance that I was meant to discover. Our real connection began on an afternoon during the height of the rainy season, a day when the sky wept so heavily that the red earth of the market turned into a slick, treacherous mud. Lost in my own thoughts, distracted by the disconnect between my life and my desires, my foot gave out from under me. I slipped, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. My large basket of yams went flying, scattering across the ground like scattered bowling pins, and I landed squarely in a gooey mess, My expensive wrapper instantly stained a muddy brown. The world seemed to pause, and I braced myself for the inevitable wave of laughter from the market women, who never miss an opportunity for some good-natured ridicule. But before the first chuckle could even escape, Obinna was there. He moved with a quiet swiftness that was astonishing, appearing at my side as if from nowhere, a silent guardian in the bustling market. His hands were calloused, clearly shaped by a life of hard labor, yet they were impossibly steady and warm as he helped me to my feet. His touch was gentle and deeply respectful, offered without a moment's hesitation or any expectation of reward. Without a single word complaint about the mud or the trouble, he began gathering every last one of my yams, wiping the slick mud from each one with a patient, meticulous care that stung me into silence. His kindness was so disarming that I felt I had to repay him. When all the yams were safely back in my basket, I tried to press some coins into his hand, a payment for his trouble and for the yams he had rescued. He gently refused, shaking his head with a small, knowing smile that reached his eyes. He just looked at me with that same profound kindness and said in a calm, melodic voice that cut through the market noise, "And Nenny, be careful. The earth here remembers every step." His words were simple, yet they struck me with the force of revelation, hinting at a wisdom that saw beyond the surface of things. After that day, I found myself inventing endless excuses to pass by his corner of the market. I would tell my family I needed a specific spice that could only be found near his stall, or that I had to visit a certain fabric seller whose shop was conveniently located just across from him. My true destination was always the man with the gentle eyes and the small, neat pile of groundnuts. I started bringing him gifts, bowls of jollof rice our cook had made, carefully wrapped in banana leaves to keep them warm, or some fresh, hot acra balls I bought from a nearby stall just for him, an offering of kindness to match his own. He never asked for anything, but the way his face would light up at these small gestures felt more profound than any grand declaration of love. Our time together blossomed into hours of quiet conversation. He didn't talk about money or business deals, the only topics I ever heard from the men in my father's circle. Instead, Obinna spoke about the ever-changing shapes of the clouds and what they foretold about the weather. He spoke of the quiet dignity he saw in the faces of the people around us, and the profound strength required to live a simple life with honor. He saw poetry in the mundane, a beauty in a world that I had been trained to overlook. Sometimes, when the market quieted down in the late afternoon, he would play his oud drum. It was a simple clay pot, but in his hands, it produced a sound so deep and soulful it felt like it was speaking for the earth itself. Listening to him play, I felt completely in love, not just with the man, but with the world he had shown me, a world where wealth was found in the peace of one's own heart. Telling my father about Obinna was a nightmare I had rehearsed in my mind for countless sleepless nights, and the reality proved to be even worse. I chose a large family gathering to make my announcement, naively hoping that the presence of my uncles and aunties might somehow temper his explosive reaction. The room was filled with our extended family, all dressed in their finest, most expensive ankara and lace fabrics. The air was thick with the cloying smell of wealth, entitlement, and a dozen different imported perfumes, a suffocating atmosphere of social expectation that I was about to shatter completely. When I finally found a lull in the boisterous conversation to speak, my voice was barely a whisper, yet possessed a strange power, cutting through the noise like a knife. The entire room went silent. "I have chosen a husband," I said, my hands trembling so badly that I had to clench them into fists in my lap to still them. Hearing this, my father's face broke into a wide, beaming smile of pure pride, his chest puffing out with satisfaction. He was absolutely certain I had finally come to my senses and selected one of his preferred wealthy suitors. "Excellent," he boomed, his voice echoing in the sudden quiet. "Is it the commissioner's son? His family has great influence in Abuja." "No, Papa," I said, my voice gaining a little strength from a source I didn't know I had. "His name is Obinna. He works in the market." The word market hung in the air like a foul, offensive smell, instantly souring the celebratory mood. For a long moment, there was only a stunned, disbelieving silence. Then, my uncle let out the first laugh, a short, ugly bark of ridicule. Soon my aunties joined in, their high-pitched, shrieking laughter like the sound of shattering glass, mocking my choice and my foolishness. My father's beaming face collapsed, transforming into a mask of stone-cold fury. "You mean the beggar?" he seethed, his voice low and dangerous. "The one who sells groundnuts on a dirty mat?" A fire I never knew I possessed ignited deep within my soul. "He is a good man." I cried out, my voice finally finding its full power, ringing with conviction that surprised even me. "He has more honor and kindness in his little finger than all of those rich, empty men you keep throwing at me. He has a soul, Papa, which is more than I can say for any of them." That single, passionate outburst sealed my fate. My father rose to his full, imposing height, casting a chilling shadow over me as he stood in judgment. "Then you will have him," he declared, his voice utterly devoid of all warmth and paternal love. "But you will have nothing else from us. If you walk out that door to marry that nobody, you are no longer my daughter." With my chin held high, I stood and walked out of that opulent room, leaving behind a life of comfort and privilege. I left with nothing but the wrapper on my body and the simple coral beads around my neck. The tears came then, hot and angry, streaming down my face, but underneath the searing pain of their rejection, there was a strange and exhilarating feeling of absolute freedom. Obinna was waiting for me at the edge of the road, just as I knew he would be. He didn't ask any questions. He just saw the tears on my face and opened his arms. Our home became a tiny, single room with a tin roof that sang to us when it rained. We were poor in every way my family understood the word, but we were never broken. In fact, we were rich in laughter and respect and in all the intangible ways that truly matter. For nearly a year, our life continued in that simple, rhythmic, and deeply happy way. We discovered profound joy in the mundane, a richness that my previous life had lacked entirely. We celebrated the taste of the roasted yam we shared for dinner, finding more satisfaction in that simple meal than in any banquet. We cherished the sound of the rain drumming on our tin roof, a lullaby that spoke of shelter and togetherness. The quiet comfort of just being in each other's presence became our most prized possession. This simple existence was a world away from the luxury I had known, yet it was the first time I had ever felt truly at home, truly content. Then one afternoon, our entire world flipped upside down with a suddenness that stole the air from my lungs. It was a blistering hot day at our beet market, the sun beating down relentlessly, when a hush fell over the entire area. The silence started at the edges and spread like a wave, a sudden, dead quiet that was more shocking and unnerving than the usual cacophony of commerce. Into that profound silence drove a convoy of shiny black jeeps, the kind that normally escort high-ranking government officials, their polished surfaces a stark contrast to the dusty market ground. They moved with a slow, imposing gravity that commanded attention. The doors of the lead jeep opened, and several men in spotless, flowing white robes and traditional red caps stepped out. Their faces were stern, etched with deep lines of seriousness and an unwavering sense of purpose. It was immediately clear that these were not politicians or businessmen seeking a local deal. They were elders, kingmakers, men who carried the weight of tradition and destiny on their shoulders. The massive crowd, which second before had been a chaotic mess of bodies, parted for them like the Red Sea parting for Moses, a silent, spontaneous path of respect and fear clearing to the very heart of the market. The elders walked with a slow, deliberate pace, their eyes scanning every face with an intense, searching focus that made my skin crawl. My heart hammered against my ribs, so hard I thought it would break free, and a cold dread washed over me. I was terrified we had somehow, unknowingly, broken a sacred rule we didn't even know existed. But the elders didn't even glance at me. Their ancient, piercing eyes were locked on one person, and one person only, Obinna, who had slowly, calmly risen to his feet, his face an unreadable mask of placid acceptance. They stopped directly in front of our humble mat of roasted groundnuts. The oldest of the men, whose face looked like a living map of Nigerian history, bowed so low that his head nearly touched the dusty ground in a gesture of ultimate deference. Igwe! The old man's voice shook with profound and ancient respect that echoed in the unnatural quiet. Your Royal Majesty, it is time. Your father, the king, has joined his ancestors. The kingdom of Ashimiri is waiting for its new ruler. It is time to come home. The The market erupted in a cacophony of gasps and frantic murmurs. My mind went completely blank. Igwe? King? My Obina? The groundnut seller? It made no sense. Then, amidst the chaos, he turned to me, and the same gentle eyes I had fallen in love with now held the unmistakable weight of a kingdom. My father believed a king could only find a woman with a pure heart if she thought he had nothing to offer, he said, his voice now carrying a natural authority that sent a shiver down my spine. He sent me away to live among the people, to find a wife who would love my soul, not my crown. I had to be sure, Chinaza. I had to find the one person who could see a king, even when he was dressed as a beggar. And you saw me. When I had nothing, you gave me everything. In Nigeria, significant news travels faster than the Harmattan wind, carried on a current of excited whispers and urgent phone calls from one town to the next, from market to village square. Before our royal convoy even reached the towering palace walls of Ashimiri, it felt as though the entire city of Enugu was buzzing with the unbelievable story. The tale of the odd-beat market beggar who was secretly a king became an instant legend, a modern-day fairy tale that captured the imagination of everyone who heard it, growing more fantastical with each retelling. My family heard the news. Of course, a distant cousin later told me that their initial, stunned shock quickly curdled into a frantic, greedy excitement that was almost comical in its transparency. About a week later, they showed up at the palace gates, their cars practically overflowing with expensive, hastily bought gifts, and their faces arranged into carefully practiced masks of deep remorse and familial love. They came not to see me, but to be seen by the Lolo, the queen. It was a pathetic and transparent performance of regret. My father, the proud chief who had thrown me out with such visceral disgust, now stood before me with his head bowed, unable to meet my gaze. I was no longer the disowned daughter in a simple wrapper. I was now dressed in the richest blue velvet robes of the royal house, with heavy ancestral coral beads draped around my neck, each one a testament to my new title, Lolo, the king's wife. My daughter, my father began, his voice cracking with performative emotion that I saw right through. We made a terrible mistake. Our pride, our foolish pride, made us blind. Can you ever find it in your heart to forgive our foolishness? I looked at their faces, at the calculating hope flickering in their eyes, and I didn't feel the sharp sting of anger I had expected. Instead, I was overcome with a wave of pity for their smallness, for their inability to see value beyond money and titles. I remembered the sharp, searing pain of their rejection, but I also remembered Obina's words when we had nothing but each other. Our love is our blessing. I no longer needed their approval. I had found my own worth. I forgive you, I said, and the words felt surprisingly real, a release of a heavy burden I didn't realize I was still carrying. But I will never forget the lesson you taught me, that a person's worth is not found in their title or their bank account. It is found in their heart. My forgiveness was not for them. It was for me. It was a final declaration that their judgment no longer had any power over my life or my happiness. My real victory wasn't seeing their shame, but in the magnificent ceremony that followed. Obina, my king, insisted that we marry properly, to honor our love before the entire kingdom. We had the grandest Igbo, or traditional wine-carrying ceremony, that the kingdom of Ashimiri had ever witnessed. I walked through cheering crowds of thousands, the air filled with pulsating music and overwhelming joy, carrying the gourd of palm wine, searching for the one man I had chosen. When I finally found him, sitting among his council of elders on a throne draped in leopard skin, I knelt and offered him the drink. I offered it not just to my husband, but to my king, my partner, and the wise man who showed me what true wealth really was. My story is about judging people by what's on the surface. So I have to ask, has there been a time when you completely misjudged someone for better or for worse? Let me know in the comments below. And for more stories about love, triumph, and the power of the human heart, make sure you subscribe. Now, when I walk to the kingdom, the children don't see a distant royal. They run to me, calling me Mama Obioma, the mother with a good heart. I may live in a magnificent palace, but I have never forgotten the profound lessons I learned in that small, simple room with a tin roof. I make it a point to tell the young girls in the kingdom to look past fancy clothes and big titles when they search for a partner. I tell them to search for a character, for kindness, for a love that feels like you finally, truly come home. Every evening, as the sun sets and paints the rolling hills of Oshimiri in shades of orange and purple, I sit with my king. Sometimes, he still takes out his old Uda drum from the market, and as he plays that deep, soulful rhythm that first captured my heart, I'm reminded that my life became the kind of story people whisper about for generations. Not the story of a girl who was lucky enough to marry a king, but of a woman who was wise enough to love a beggar.